Today, we're diving into something really strange, a paradox at the heart of our economy. We are surrounded by these amazing, futuristic technologies, but for some reason, they don't seem to be making us richer, at least not in the way we'd expect. And that leads to an even bigger question. Are we even measuring what it means to be rich the right way? Okay, so let's kick things off with this puzzle, a contradiction that has some of the smartest people on the planet kind of scratching their heads. It's often called the Great Slowdown. So here's the big question, right? We live in this incredible age of technological miracles. I mean, we've got AI transforming whole industries, we've got supercomputers literally in our pockets. So why has productivity growth, which is really the engine of all our prosperity, been so meh for the last decade or so? It really feels like we're living in two different worlds at the same time. On one side, you have this explosion of innovation, the internet, AI, big data, all of it. But then you look at the hard economic numbers and you see sluggish growth, stagnant incomes. These two realities just don't seem to fit together. And yet, here we are. It's a genuine paradox. So what gives? Well, economists have a few big theories they're kicking around. One is something called secular stagnation. Basically, the idea that we're all saving too much and not finding enough good places to invest it. Another theory is that, for all the hype, today's tech just isn't as world-changing as, say, electricity or the steam engine were. Others point to an aging population, or maybe it's just that it takes decades for society to really figure out how to use revolutionary new tools. But there's another really fascinating idea out there. What if the real bottleneck isn't our technology at all? What if it's us? The thinking goes that our economic growth is limited by the number of truly unique, talented people. You can copy a piece of software a billion times for free, but you can't just copy a brilliant scientist or a visionary CEO. You can't digitize genius. And because that talent is so rare, those people end up capturing most of the economic rewards. This whole puzzle, it really forces us to take a step back and ask a much deeper question. Maybe the problem isn't just with the economy. Maybe the problem is with the ruler we're using to measure it. What if we're not even measuring the right thing? For the last 70+ years, one number has completely dominated the conversation. When you hear on the news that the economy is growing or the country's doing well, they are almost always talking about one thing: gross domestic product, GDP. It's become the go-to shorthand for how a country is doing. So what is GDP really? Well, the key thing to remember is that it's a measure of flow. Think of it just like your annual salary. It tells you how much money a country made this year. It's all the goods, all the services, all added up. But that's it. That's where its vision stops. And this right here is the critical blind spot. A high salary looks fantastic, but it tells you nothing about whether that person is also maxing out their credit cards, selling off their family furniture, and letting their house crumble just to make ends meet. GDP works the same way for a country. It tracks income, but it says absolutely nothing about the country's overall balance sheet. Is the nation actually getting richer for the long haul, or is it just cashing in its assets for a short-term boost? And this leads us to a much more powerful, more complete way of thinking about progress. We need to stop looking just at the annual income and start looking at the entire national balance sheet. And that brings us to this concept of national wealth. So if GDP is the flow, like a salary, wealth is the stock. It's a person's total net worth, their house, their savings, their education, everything they own. For a country, its wealth is the total value of all of its assets. And that stock of assets is what really determines its ability to create well-being for its citizens, generation after generation. Now, national wealth isn't just one big number. It's actually made up of three key pillars. You've got produced capital. That's all the stuff we build, like roads and factories. Then there's human capital. That's the skills, the health, and the education of our people. And then, crucially, you have natural capital. All the resources our planet gives us, like forests, clean air, and minerals. Now, to be super clear, nobody is saying we should just toss GDP in the trash. It's a useful number. The idea here is to add wealth to the dashboard. Think of it like this. GDP tells you how fast the car is going right now. But wealth tells you how much gas is left in the tank and whether the engine's about to overheat. It's all about adding that long-term, sustainable view. Okay, I know this can all sound a little bit abstract, so let's make it super concrete with a really powerful case study from India. A team of economists actually set out to calculate the country's total wealth, and what they found was, well, it was pretty mind-blowing.
Here's a peek at what they came up with. They took that exact framework we just talked about, produced capital, human capital, natural capital, and they put a dollar value on each one for India over a 5-year period. And the numbers they came back with just completely upended the traditional way of looking at a nation's prosperity. So let's break down what they found, because this is where it gets really interesting. First off, the value of India's natural capital, its forests, its farmland, its minerals, was worth more than all of its factories, roads, and buildings combined. Then, the value of its human capital from education alone was worth over 4 times more than all that machinery and infrastructure. But even that was small potatoes compared to the single biggest asset. The single most valuable asset was health. When they calculated the economic value of people living longer, healthier lives, it came out to $500,000 per person. That's an order of magnitude larger than everything else put together. This is just a stunning finding. The health and the lifespan of a country's people is, by far, its most precious economic resource. But, and this is a really big but, there's a worrying part to this story. What the data showed was a classic trade-off. Yes, produced capital was growing fast. India was building a lot of stuff. But at the exact same time, its natural capital was declining. And when you put it all together, the country's total wealth per person was barely growing at all. It was basically running as fast as it could just to stand still. And all of this brings us to the big takeaway, the so what of it all. Shifting our focus from just counting this year's income to measuring our total stock of wealth is really about changing our perspective from what we earn today to what we're leaving for tomorrow. And this idea connects perfectly to the classic definition of sustainable development we've all heard before. It's really about inheritance, isn't it? It's about making sure the next generation gets a world with at least as many opportunities as we had. So if you put those two ideas together, you get this really clear, simple, measurable definition for sustainability. A society is on a truly sustainable path if, and only if, its total wealth per person is not going down. It's that simple. Are we adding to our national net worth, or are we chipping away at it? That's the ultimate test. This quote just nails the danger of getting this wrong. If we only look at metrics like GDP, we can easily fool ourselves. We can see a number go up and call it innovation, when what we're actually doing is just getting more efficient at cutting down our forests or depleting our natural resources. We end up mistaking the liquidation of our inheritance for genuine progress. And that leaves all of us with a final, really big question. It forces us to look past the day-to-day economic headlines and ask something much more fundamental about our future. Are we actually getting richer as a society, or are we just getting really good at selling off the family heirlooms? It's a question worth thinking about.